All right, so basically at this point now you've kind of worked yourself through, the entire uh, clip of video, and to the best of your ability, you've tried to nail that. So, it's probably a good idea. Well, we should have been doing this anyways, but, at this point, you want to go file save as, and, you want to update your version number. And, your autosave vault has been kind of doing this for you every 5 minutes, which is good too. But, again, it's so important to understand that you can't just rely on autosave. You should also be manually saving as well. It's kind of what's called dual redundancy. So I basically kind of gone through all the frames. I'm going to take my playhead right back to the beginning. And if you hit your spacebar and have a look at it, and depending on the job that you did, you might notice there's like some what they call chatter around the edges, particularly around like the hat. Um, and again, that's not unusual to get that. So we do have some other tricks up our sleeve that we're going to try here. So we're going to try to fine tune the mat. So you can see we can use some various tricks up our sleeves here. You can see up here we have some controls to kind of help with that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to increase the feather amount. We're going to go to a 10. So that kind of feathers the edges. And then where it says reduce chatter, we're going to set that up to about 20%. And then go ahead and hit the space bar. And now that's kind of rendering. That's why it's running a lot slower. And hopefully once it makes its way through the whole thing, by adjusting that feathering amount and that chatter amount, it should make that jumping around of those lines, those pink lines, that segmentation boundary, look a little less frantic. Now, again, you can increase that reduced chatter amount, up to 50%, and again, it really all depends on how much attention you've, you know, paid to details as you were doing this. And there's no shortcuts here, folks. It's hard work. And if you're going to work in special effects, it's hard work. And so hopefully that kind of, yeah, see, for mine anyways, it reduced the chatter quite a bit, and the feathering kind of helped again as well. There are some other things that you can try as well that are of use for tightening up these effects. There is a refine edge tool that is also available that can help with that, especially around the edges of the hat, and it's one of these things that you can access. It's actually hidden under your roto brush tool. So there's the refine edge tool, and if you want, particularly having problems around the edge of that hat, you could go in and you could use that tool to basically kind of touch it up a little bit to get rid of some of that process. So again, depending on where that becomes an issue in this particular layer, but probably around the 120 mark that becomes an issue because of the blanching of that background. It's not so bad when you get in the tree because it's such a dark background, but all that area is kind of washed out. So you can try to use that refine edge tool to kind of fix that. And again, that's available here. So I can go to that refine edge tool, and again, I can take that and the brush size. It's going to be a fairly small brush, probably like 10 pixels, And what I could do is I could take that refine edge tool and kind of work around those edges that I think are problematic. Kind of gives like an x-ray view, which again, it's no big deal. that you see that right now, because that's not going to have any effect in the final render. That's just going to help to stabilize those edges. All right, so we'll go File, Save As. And I'm going to go up to version 6 now. And of course, we get to a point where there's not much we can do. So what we want to do now is we want to freeze the roto brush results. So if you notice down here, there's a freeze button. And what we're going to do basically now is we're going to click that freeze button. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through frame by frame. And it's basically going to lock that segmentation boundary. So we basically this is a final decision. Now, it doesn't mean we can't go back and unfreeze that, because we can. But let's just, for the sake of expediency for today's lesson, we're going to be happy with whatever results we have. Notice how the background went black and white as well. That's because it's basically in the process of separating the foreground from the background. You can see where that kind of refined edge kind of thing kicked in there. So again, that's not going to be seen on the visual, but it is kind of calculating and calibrating to basically kind of get that refined edge look. Okay, so we'll see how well that works. And at this stage of the game, again, because we're learning, all we can do now is let it run its course. And, obviously there'll be more chances for you to refine this effect down the road, because it's one of these things. You don't jump on a bike and well, you might pop a wheelie, but it's not because you wanted to do it. It's because you don't know what you're doing. So it's the same goes with this piece of software. You can try stuff, and sometimes you get lucky, it works out really well, and sometimes you got to go back and you got to redo it again. But again, that's the nature of working in special effects. If you've been working at it for 25, 30 years, you probably know a lot of shortcuts, but you haven't. So you have to live with that. So basically now that's frozen those results. And now what we can do is we can go down here and we can actually click to have a look at the segmentation boundaries to check to see what's going on down here. So we click that, and we can basically toggle the transparency mode for the grid. If we go to the composition, that's basically what we're seeing. So what we have left is only the foreground, and the background has all been thrown away. And so that is what happens when you do this effect. So that's the actual effect of it on the layer. But remember, the layer is part of that composition. So that's what's really happening. Now, of course, you'll see it against a black background. And that's because that's the default background of your composition. So if you go to your composition, you go to composition settings, you'll see that that's the background color is black. So that's what you're seeing. Just like in that last video where we cut the hole in the monitor. We could change that color to whatever we want, but that's basically the background of that layer. Okay, so let's go File, Save As, assuming we're happy with the results. So I'm up to version 7. Save that. And yeah, so that basically is how that works out right now. So I've got the young boy separated from the background, and I've thrown away all the background. And of course, what I want to do now is I want to, create some effects. And what we'll do in the next step is we'll create some of those cool effects using the fact that there's no more background there.